Is Hmong village in Minnesota haunted? This is a question I often ask myself whenever my family comes to do their shopping. The Hmong village I am talking about is the new one built a few years ago by Lake Phelan. Once you get past the traffic and find a parking spot in the crowded lot, Hmong village is a great place to come and enjoy food as well as meet up with people. It is often so busy that you'll find customers wandering around the crowded hallways and paths. You forget that this place could be filled with ghosts and spirits that lurk around. It was a Saturday afternoon when my family wanted to go and buy some fruits. I decided to tag along because I could get a chance to browse through some Hmong clothes. We got off of Johnson Parkway and turned into the parking lot. It's so hard to find any good parking spots close to the building. Sometimes, when you're driving through, you'd get stuck as vehicles are trying to enter and exit the building. After a few minutes of driving us around, my dad decided to park the car farther away. He said that it would be good exercise for us anyways. With my parents and two younger siblings, our family entered the building. I told my parents that I was going to go and look for some Hmong clothes and that I'll meet up with them in the food court. There were crowds of people trying to make their way through. I swear, some people just like to take their sweet time and talk in the middle of the path, causing traffic jams. After that ordeal, I walked through the little strip with vendors selling Hmong clothes and all sorts of items, things like medicine, decorations, and kitchenware. After a few turns, I saw some vendors that sold clothes and stopped by to take a look. None of them really interested me as I couldn't afford the prices, nor were they my taste, so I continued walking down the alleyway in search of more stalls. As I was strolling through, I noticed that there weren't a lot of people anymore. This was typical because most of the time, customers bunched up by the food court and grocery area. These were the hotspots for people to do their shopping. Even so, it was normal to have a few people walk around by this area, but for some odd reason, I was the only one shopping there. I paused to take a good look at my surroundings. Some vendors were on their phones and some were working in their stalls. I didn't notice it at first, but in the stall up ahead of me, there was a person peeking from behind some clothes. They were standing behind those retail clothing racks as I noticed their long black hair and pitch black face. The only features that were somewhat visible were their eyes. They looked human, but there was something off about them. It was like there was no life behind those eyes. I immediately had a bad feeling in my gut. The figure was still peeking at me when I decided to walk backwards and change directions. I rounded a corner and speed walked through the alleys. At this point, I was panicking and the place became a maze. I forgot where I had entered from, and what was worse, this thing was following me. I'd see it at the corner of my eyes, peeking from behind desks or shelves. It felt like I was the only one that noticed this thing as the vendors didn't even see it. I gave up on going back to the food court and decided to exit outside. I felt an immediate sense of relief as I pushed open those glass doors. I called my family to see where they were at, and they told me that they had been waiting in the food court. They had already bought me some food and were sitting down. I asked them if we could just eat at home instead, to which they obliged since the place was crowded and I wouldn't have a place to sit. I told them that I had already come outside and that I'll wait for them by the car. A couple of minutes later, my family hadn't arrived yet. Under the summer heat, I decided to get some shade under the big tree by the parking lot. Our car was parked directly in front of it. In the distance, I finally saw my family emerge from the doors. They made their way to the car, and when I asked them what took them so long, my mom said that my dad met some of his old friends from Michigan and they were taking pictures. They handed me some fruits to try out and put my siblings in the car. By now, I was calm and trying to find a logical reason for what I had encountered. I didn't tell my parents about what chased me because I couldn't believe it myself. We returned home and everything was fine. However, that night and from then on, I had a recurring nightmare of being chased by the thing in Hmong village. I would dream that it was empty and that all the doors were locked and I couldn't escape. I would be running to hide behind stalls and shelves as the figure chased me down the hallways. It was only when the thing would be about to catch me that I'd wake up sweating. Because of this, I got very sick and my family had a warning for me. When consulting with the shaman, she stated that I happened to be there at an unlucky time, which was why I encountered the entity. We had to change my name in order for the thing to stop haunting me. Due to this, I don't go to Hmong village anymore because I'm still afraid that it could still be there, waiting for me. Interested in sharing your stories? Submit them to HmongChronicles@gmail.com or in the description below. Here is the next story. Thank you. I grew up with traditional Hmong parents with belief in shamanism. The following is a couple of experiences my family and I had growing up. All these experiences happened when I was around 4 to 6 years old, as far as I can remember. The house that I grew up in, I remember seeing a lot of black shadows passing by the rooms or from the corner of my eyes. Since I was little, I never thought much about it. Now that I'm older, if I had experienced that, I would have freaked the heck out. While living there, my siblings and I would often have very scary dreams. They always consisted of being chased by the ghost from that movie Jay Tishua. There was also another Hmong movie that terrified them. Some of you may remember it as the Ntepada Te Avin Yao. These movies were so scary to me when I was little. I remember while living there that my sisters and I and my one little brother got sick very often. I always remembered my dad doing the traditional ritual with the chicken and hupli to call everyone else's spirit back. Now that I think about it, I feel like my dad was always constantly doing these types of rituals almost every month. My sister was sleeping this one afternoon with the room door closed. She had called my name loudly and I came to see what she wanted. She told me to leave the door open. I asked her why, and I guess the closet had opened by itself. I also remember that when all my siblings would be at school, I would be home alone with my mom and my younger brother. Sometimes I would be playing in the room by myself and just start to feel scared out of nowhere. I didn't know what the feeling was because I was only 4 at the time. Now that I'm older and think back on it, there was probably something there with me. I remember this one day, while all my siblings were at school and it was just my mom and my little brother, my mom had to go outside in the backyard to do something really quick. She had told my brother and I to come out with her. In the section of the backyard we were at, we were near our kitchen window, which was slightly opened. Suddenly, we heard what sounded like dishes being thrown around. I looked at my mom and I can't really remember exactly what she said, but she said something along the likes of, "There's a ghost messing with the dishes." I was scared when she told me that, and I thought that she was just messing around. When we went back inside, everything was still in place and I quickly brushed it off. Thinking back on it now, my mom was definitely not playing around. An experience that happened to me was when I was probably 5 or 6. I remembered that it was a Saturday morning because my sister had already woken up to watch morning cartoons. I had awoken to a rough big hand grabbing at my feet and tickling it. I was still really tired, but I got up and crawled to check the floor at the bottom of my bed to see nothing. Since I was still tired, I thought nothing of it and went back to sleep. Again, I didn't think much of it because I was little. If this had happened to me now, I definitely would have freaked out. Recently, my sisters and I were sharing our encounters we had at the house at the time. Apparently, my sisters never saw the black shadows walking around that I did. I thought that they all saw the same things I was seeing, but one of my sisters saw a hand wave at her this one time. My other sister said that one night she fell asleep in the living room and woke up to a black shadow just standing there looking at her. She wasn't scared, so she fell back asleep. This one thing happened, but I don't really recall it. My sisters always mentioned this to me from time to time as we grew up. This one time, as I was outside in the backyard with my dad just looking around at my mom's garden, apparently I told my dad, "Oh, Dad, there's something white over there. Could you go and catch it for me?" My dad freaked out and just left me outside by myself. I literally have no memory of this. Also, while living there, I would sleepwalk a lot. I would randomly just wake up and start crying and walking around. My mom always got upset and mad, hitting me and telling me to stop. Now that I think about it, it probably freaked her out, and I'm not sure if me sleepwalking around was a coincidence while living there or not. I recently found out that back at the time we had an uncle who was a shaman, and I call him uncle because he really wasn't blood related. But you know how Hmong people are when it comes to family friends who have the last name as you. Apparently, he was doing black magic towards my dad and a few other relatives. So after every time he came over to our house, my mom would throw rice all around the house after he left. She would say certain things like, "You don't belong here," or whatever they say when they do those chants. I guess my dad was on the brink of dying because of the black magic being performed towards him, and since it was black magic, taking my dad to the hospital was no good since there wouldn't be anything medically wrong with him. All those black shadows I would see was caused by the black magic. Those spirits, or whatever they were, would always bother my dad. I'm not actually sure how my dad got rid of the black magic. He seemed to get better way before my quote-unquote uncle had passed away. I'm not too sure either because we had moved out of that house when I was 7, and that was before his passing. But after my quote-unquote uncle passed away, my dad wasn't experiencing any more problems, as far as I know now. My siblings and I had went to help with the funeral and help them fold joss paper money. It makes me upset knowing this now because how could he do that to my dad? Someone who I thought was a good man. I'm not too sure if he died from old age because he didn't seem that old to me. But then again, I was little and didn't know him very well. Perhaps karma had finally gotten to him for what he had done to my dad and the other relatives as well. Nonetheless, my dad is better now, so I'm grateful that he is still here today despite what he had gone through. After we had moved out of that house, my siblings and I stopped having constant nightmares. This occurred right after I graduated from high school in 1992, and yet when I'm still telling this story, I get emotional. Right after graduation, I discovered that I was pregnant. I was so upset with myself and depressed, thinking I ruined my life. I was accepted to go to Howard University and due to start that August. One day, I was home by myself crying on my parents' bed and questioning my faith in God. Then suddenly, I couldn't move. It was as if someone or something was holding me down on the bed. Words cannot describe how scared I was. I began to see a transparent shape coming towards me. As it got closer, the shape began to look familiar. It looked like my grandfather. I was so frightened, I closed my eyes. I then saw a vision of a little boy laughing. Then it changed to a ceremony. I saw myself walking on stage with a cap and gown to accept a degree. When I opened my eyes, the shape was gone and I was able to move again. As I was getting off the bed, I noticed that my parents' picture of the praying hands with the Lord's Prayer had fallen off the wall onto the bed. I refused to believe what had happened, so I brushed it off. Maybe the picture had hit me in the head, causing me to hallucinate. The next morning, I overheard my father telling my mother that he believed he saw his father's spirit in the house the night before. My mother replied by saying, "I wonder what's wrong. He only appears when something is wrong." After hearing that, I had to come out with my secret. Now I have a boy who is 16. I have 2 degrees now and am very successful. Thank you, Grandpa. Before my husband and I had Jingle Bell for me, I used to sense things and see things in my house. My house is completely new. It was built last year, and we are the first occupants, so it can't be nothing like former occupants. I'm gonna tell some things only. One morning, my 1-year-old son and I were up. I think we were both in the kitchen because I was making breakfast. I could hear somebody clear their throat, kind of like a loud ahem. I thought that it was my husband. I went to check it out and there wasn't anybody. I then looked at the TV and the channels were flipping. In order to switch the channels, you have to point the remote at the cable box. I was so scared, I took my son and ran into the bedroom just to find my husband sleeping away, snoring loudly. A couple nights later, I woke up and heard noises in my bedroom. I have a big bathroom, and there wasn't much stuff hanging on the walls, and of course, every bathroom echoes. I heard someone moving around my stuff, the same noises that you would hear if someone were to pick up something like a lotion bottle and set it back down. The third incident was when my auntie was sick from cancer. Her last days were the most freaky for me. She's never seen my house before, so I thought at the time that since she was doing her monthly chemo and radiation, she was super tired. I would go to work very early at around 6 in the morning, and I would take the same road every single morning and listen to the same songs, but that morning was different. As I rode through the dark road, something was different about the song. It sounded so different. I listened closely and I could hear Hmong ritual drums beating and I could hear the gong playing. I heard the cries and wails of family members. I got scared and turned down the volume. However, I could still hear the sounds. It wasn't very loud or noticeable, but very light in the background. I got so scared and decided to speed down the road. I was the only one traveling until I reached a stoplight. I felt so much better because there were other cars. I dared not look in the mirrors nor the side mirrors. A couple of nights later, my aunt had passed away. After she died, I had a dream that she came to visit me. I was so scared of her in my dream because she came to my house and was wearing Hmong clothes. My aunt looked very healthy and normal looking. I guess I was scared because I knew that she was gone. At first, we were at her house, but as I ran outside and looked back, it was my house. She was upset at me, and I remembered exactly what she had said to me. "Why are you running away? You told me to come see your new house, and I'm happy for you. But you're running away from me, so I'm going home now." I woke up and remembered that 3 or 4 weeks ago, before she had passed away, she started to lose her memory. I told her that my husband and I bought our very first home, and I wanted her to come visit me so that I could cook her a meal at my home. I guess she wanted to come make me happy because I really wanted her to see it. Before she died, she told me how happy she was to see that I'm carrying a good life, regardless of what people have said about me. My husband loves me very much and provides me with a good and healthy relationship. I am forever grateful for her to come and say goodbye. I should have reacted differently, but it's okay because they say that if you're mean to a ghost, the ghost will not come bother you anymore. I guess it was okay for me to act that way too. Superstitious